Ambassador Zektar of the Vorthak Empire adjusted his breathing apparatus as he stepped aboard the human vessel Indomitable Spirit. The metal corridors hummed with an energy that felt different from Vorthak ships, rawer, more aggressive. His 4 eyes scanned the bulkheads, noting the scratches and dents the human crews seemed to wear as badges of honor rather than signs of poor maintenance. Captain Sarah-chan greeted him at the airlock, her small frame dwarfed by Zektar's imposing 8-foot height. Yet something in her dark eyes made the seasoned diplomat feel oddly unsettled. Perhaps it was the way she looked at him, not with the reverence most species showed the Vorthak, but with calculating assessment. Ambassador Zektar, welcome aboard, Chun said, her voice carrying a crisp authority. I trust your journey from the diplomatic station was comfortable. Zektar's translator rendered her words in perfect Vorthak, though he noticed she spoke slowly, deliberately. Indeed, Captain, though I confess curiosity about this demonstration your people have requested. The Galactic Council found it most unusual. Chen's lips curved in what humans called a smile. Though Zektar had learned these expressions often masked deeper emotions. I think you'll find it educational, Ambassador. Please, follow me to the observation deck. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Zektar observed the human crew with growing fascination. Unlike other species he had encountered, humans seemed to radiate a barely contained energy. They moved with purpose, their faces set in expressions of grim determination. When they noticed him, their eyes held none of the fear or submission he was accustomed to seeing from lesser species. The observation deck overlooked the ship's main hangar bay, where Zektar could see rows of what the humans called Marines standing in formation. Each wore dark armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and their faces were hidden behind helmets with glowing red visors that reminded him uncomfortably of predatory eyes. Impressive, Zektar murmured, though privately he wondered what these small beings could possibly accomplish that would interest the mighty Vorthak Empire. Your warriors seem disciplined. They're not just warriors, Ambassador, Chen replied. They're protectors, guardians, and when necessary, she paused, her voice taking on a harder edge. Instruments of justice. Below them, the hangar bay doors began to open, revealing the vast emptiness of space beyond. In the distance, Zektar could see the target of this demonstration, a derelict space station that had once served as a pirate stronghold. Intelligence reports indicated it was now abandoned, making it perfect for weapons testing. The station, you see, was responsible for attacks on 17 civilian convoys over the past solar cycle, Chen explained. Hundreds of innocent beings died. Humans, Altarians, even some of your own people, Ambassador. The pirates who operated from there were thorough in their brutality. Zektar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The Vorthak Empire had lost 3 cargo vessels to those raids, but their response had been measured, diplomatic. They had filed complaints with the Galactic Council and increased security on subsequent shipments. It was the civilized approach. I understand your frustration, Captain, but surely the proper channels failed, Chen interrupted, her voice carrying a note that made Zektar's primary heart skip a beat. The Galactic Council debated for months while more innocents died. The pirates grew bolder, more vicious. They began taking prisoners for sport. On the deck below, the Marines had begun loading into assault shuttles. Zektar watched with growing unease as these small figures moved with mechanical precision, each one carrying weapons that seemed disproportionately large for their frames. What you're about to witness, Ambassador, is what happens when humanity decides that enough is enough, Chen said. Her hand rested on a control console, fingers hovering over what Zektar assumed was the launch command. We tried diplomacy first. We always do. But when diplomacy fails, when the innocent continue to suffer while bureaucrats debate, she pressed the button. The assault shuttles launched from the hangar bay like projectiles from some cosmic weapon, their engines leaving trails of blue fire against the black of space. Zektar watched through the observation deck's reinforced windows as the small craft accelerated toward the distant station with surprising speed. Your shuttles are quite fast, he observed, trying to maintain diplomatic composure despite a growing sense of apprehension. Those aren't just shuttles, Ambassador. They're guided missiles with life support. Chen's eyes never left the tactical display, showing the approaching human craft. Each one carries a full squad of Marines equipped for zero-atmosphere combat. They're not going to disable the station's defenses or demand surrender. Zektar felt a chill run down his spinal ridge. Then, what are they going to do? Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. They're going to show you why humans don't negotiate with monsters. The first shuttle reached the station's outer hull and didn't slow down. Instead, it struck with tremendous force, its armored prow punching through metal plating like it was paper. Explosions bloomed along the station's surface as more shuttles followed, each one targeting a different section with surgical precision. Impressive tactical coordination, Zektar admitted, though his voice carried a tremor he hoped the human couldn't detect. But surely the station is already abandoned, Ambassador, Chen said quietly, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The station isn't abandoned. Zektar's four eyes widened in shock. What do you mean? Our intelligence clearly indicated your intelligence was wrong. Chun turned to face him fully, and for the first time, Zektar saw something in her expression that made his blood run cold. It wasn't anger. It was something far more terrifying. It was the calm, measured fury of a species that had decided someone needed to pay for their crimes. On the display, new contacts appeared around the station. Ships began emerging from hidden bays and camouflage positions, dozens of them, ranging from small fighters to heavy cruisers. The pirate fleet had been lying in wait, using the station as bait for any military force foolish enough to attack. It was a trap, and the humans had walked right into it. "Captain," Zektar said urgently, "you must recall your Marines immediately. That fleet will destroy your shuttles." "No," Chen replied simply. "They won't." As if summoned by her words, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Human warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, surrounding the pirate fleet in a sphere of overlapping fire zones. But these weren't exploration vessels or cargo haulers. These were ships built for one purpose only. Va. The lead vessel was massive, its hull black as the void between stars, and bristling with weapons that Zektar couldn't immediately identify. Its name blazed across its prow in characters that seemed to burn with their own light, retribution. "You see, Ambassador," Chun said conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than the prelude to slaughter, "we knew about the trap. We've known for weeks. We let them prepare, let them gather their entire fleet in one place. Do you know why?" Zektar couldn't speak. His vocal cords had frozen along with the rest of his body as he watched more human ships materialize around the pirates. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Each one larger and more heavily armed than anything he had imagined the young human race capable of building. Because when humans decide to end something, Chun continued, we don't do it halfway. We don't leave survivors to rebuild or seek revenge. When we unleash our fury, we make sure that what we're destroying can never, ever threaten innocence again. The first weapons exchange lit up space like a miniature star being born. The pirate fleet opened fire with everything they had, energy beams and projectile weapons creating a deadly light show against the darkness. For a moment, Zektar thought the humans might actually be in trouble. The pirates had superior numbers and had chosen their ground well. Then, the human fleet responded. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The weapons the humans unleashed defied everything Zektar thought he knew about military technology. Beams of coherent energy that seemed to punch holes in reality itself. Projectiles that struck with the force of small asteroids. And, strangest of all, weapons that seemed to target not just ships, but the very quantum structure of space around them, creating zones where matter simply ceased to exist. One by one, the pirate vessels were systematically dismantled. Not destroyed, dismantled. The human weapons seemed designed to disable rather than vaporize, leaving the crews alive, but helpless as their ships were reduced to scrap metal. Why aren't you just destroying them? Zektar whispered, though part of him dreaded the answer. Because death will be merciful, Chen replied. And these creatures forfeited any claim to mercy when they chose to prey on the innocent. On the tactical display, Zektar could see that the assault shuttles had reached the station's interior. The Marines were moving through its corridors with the same mechanical precision they had shown during boarding, but now he could see their true purpose. They weren't just soldiers. They were hunters, tracking down every pirate who had participated in the raids. "What are they doing in there?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Justice," Chen said simply. "Each Marine carries a complete database of every crime committed by this organization. Every innocent killed, every ship destroyed, every family torn apart. They're matching faces to crimes, Ambassador, making sure that every individual responsible for those atrocities faces judgment." The systematic nature of it was what truly terrified Zektar. This wasn't rage or bloodthirst. It was something far more frightening. It was methodical, calculated vengeance carried out with the precision of a surgical operation. The humans weren't acting out of emotion. They were acting out of absolute moral certainty. Hours passed. On the display, Zektar watched as the human Marines worked their way through every section of the station. The surviving pirate ships hung powerless in space, their crews trapped aboard vessels that had become floating prisons. And, through it all, Chun stood beside him with the calm demeanor of someone watching a routine maintenance procedure. "This is what you wanted to show the Galactic Council?" Zektar finally asked. "This demonstration of human military capability?" Chen turned to him with that unsettling smile. "Oh, Ambassador, this isn't about military capability. Any species can build weapons, train soldiers. What you've witnessed today is something far more important." She gestured toward the tactical display, where the final pirate vessel was being boarded by human Marines. "What you've seen is what happens when humanity decides that evil will not be tolerated. When we choose to draw a line and say no further. Your people, the Vorthak, are warriors. You understand strength, respect power. But do you understand justice?" Zektar found himself unable to answer. In Vorthak culture, strength determined right. The powerful took what they could. The weak endured what they must. It was the natural order of things, written in the genetic code of every living being in the galaxy. Except, apparently, humans. "The pirates you've eliminated today were a minor threat," he said finally. "Criminals, yes, but hardly a significant military force. Why dedicate such resources to—" "Because it's not about the scale of the threat," Chen interrupted. "It's about the principle. Today, we eliminated a pirate organization. Tomorrow, if necessary, we'll eliminate something larger. Next year, if anyone is foolish enough to test us, we'll eliminate something larger still." She paused, her eyes boring into his with an intensity that made him want to look away. "The message isn't about what we can do to pirates, Ambassador. The message is about what we will do to anyone who preys on innocence. Anyone, regardless of their size, their technology, or their political connections." As if to emphasize her point, the final reports began streaming in from the Marine units aboard the station. Every pirate had been located, cataloged, and detained. Those guilty of murder would face immediate execution. Those guilty of lesser crimes would be transported to human penal colonies where they would spend the remainder of their lives working to repay their victims' families. "Your people are thorough," Zektar observed, struggling to keep his voice steady. "We have to be," Chen replied. "Do you know why humans are the only species to achieve faster-than-light travel within 2 centuries of discovering fire?" Zektar shook his head, not trusting his voice. "Because we're the only species that learned to turn our capacity for violence into a tool for protecting others. Every other race in the galaxy uses their strength to dominate the weak. Humans use our strength to shield the weak from domination." She gestured toward the view screen, where the pirate station now hung dark and lifeless, its corridors cleared of the criminals who had once called it home. "What you've witnessed today, Ambassador, is just the beginning. Humanity is done watching innocent beings suffer while others debate and deliberate. We're done accepting that evil is just part of the natural order. From now on, when monsters reveal themselves, they'll find humans waiting for them. The return journey to the diplomatic station passed in silence. Zektar spent the time composing his report to the Vorthak High Command, though he struggled to find words that could adequately convey what he had witnessed. How do you explain to a warrior culture that there exists a species capable of violence beyond imagining, yet restrained by principles that transcend mere survival? As a shuttle prepared to dock with the diplomatic station, Chen's final words echoed in his mind. Tell your people, Ambassador. Tell them all. The age of tolerating evil, because it's easier than fighting it, has ended. Humanity has awakened, and we will not go back to sleep. Zektar sealed his report and transmitted it with the highest priority encryption. Within hours, it would reach every major power in the galaxy. The message was simple. Humanity had revealed itself as something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that fought not for conquest or dominance, but for justice itself. And that, Zektar realized as he watched the human fleet disappear into hyperspace, was the most terrifying thing of all. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 72 hours after Ambassador Zektar submitted his report. Delegates from 47 star systems crowded into the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime, their various forms creating a bizarre menagerie of scales, feathers, chitin, and synthetic materials. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the different atmospheric requirements, creating swirling currents that carried the mingled scents and pheromones of a dozen different biochemistries. High Counselor Vexini, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns across the walls, called the session to order with a harmonic chime that resonated through everyone's auditory organs regardless of species. Fellow delegates, she announced, her voice carrying the authority of 5 centuries of diplomatic experience. We have gathered an emergency session to address the report filed by Ambassador Zektar regarding recent human military actions. The implications of these events may fundamentally alter the balance of power in our galaxy. Zektar felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes upon him as he approached the speaker's podium. His report had been distributed to all member species, but he knew that many had dismissed it as exaggeration or propaganda. The Vorthak were known for their martial pride. Surely one of their ambassadors would be inclined to overstate the military capabilities of any potential rival. Honored delegates, Zektar began, his translator converting his words into the standard galactic trade language. I stand before you not as a Vorthak supremacist or warmonger, but as a witness to something unprecedented in our recorded history. The human species has demonstrated capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of warfare, justice, and power itself. Senator Thrixal of the Hegemony rose from his seat, his insectoid form clicking with agitation. Ambassador Zektar, while we respect your expertise in military matters, surely you cannot expect this council to believe that a species barely 2 centuries out of their homeworld's gravity poses a significant threat to established powers. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The humans were newcomers, having achieved faster-than-light travel only recently. Most species required millennia to develop the technologies and social structures necessary for interstellar expansion. The idea that these young mammals could threaten civilizations that had ruled the stars when Earth was still a ball of molten rock seemed absurd. Zektar activated his portable holographic projector, filling the air above the podium with tactical displays from the Pirate Station engagement. The assembled delegates fell silent as they watched human shuttles punch through armor plating like it was tissue paper, as weapons beyond their comprehension carved through space itself. What you're seeing, Zektar continued, is not the product of superior technology alone. Yes, human weapons are devastating, more so than anything in our current arsenals. But what makes them truly dangerous is how they employ these weapons. He manipulated the hologram, highlighting the systematic way the Marines had moved through the station. Every action was calculated. Every target was chosen not for tactical advantage, but for maximum impact on the criminal organization's ability to harm others. They didn't simply destroy, they dismantled, cataloged, and judged. Counselor Mordak of the Federation leaned forward, her multiple arms gesturing dismissively. Impressive police work, perhaps, but hardly the actions of a galactic power. One criminal organization was eliminated completely, Zektar interrupted, surprising himself with the force of his response. Not defeated, not scattered, eliminated. Every member accounted for, every ship captured or destroyed, every base of operations mapped and neutralized. In 6 standard hours. He paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. But that's not the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part is that they made it look easy. The hologram shifted to show the human fleet that had surrounded the pirates. Ship after ship appeared in the display, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything most of the delegates had ever seen. Gasps and exclamations in a dozen languages filled the chamber as the true scale of the human operation became clear. These vessels, Zektar said quietly, represent only a small fraction of the human military. According to their own public records, which they freely share, another unsettling trait, they maintain over 3,000 ships of similar or larger size across their territories. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates leaped to their feet, shouting questions and accusations in their native languages. Some accused Zektar of fabricating the data. Others demanded immediate military action against the human threat, and still others called for emergency diplomatic missions to establish formal relations before it was too late. High Counselor Vexani's harmonic chime cut through the noise, its frequency precisely calibrated to cause mild discomfort in every species present. Order was slowly restored, though the tension in the chamber remained thick enough to taste. Ambassador Zektar, Vexani said formally, you spoke of implications. Please elaborate on what you believe these human capabilities mean for the broader galactic community. Zektar had spent 3 sleepless nights preparing for this question. His answer would likely determine how the galaxy responded to humanity's emergence as a major power. Honored Counselor, in my analysis, we face 3 possible futures. First, we can attempt to contain or control human expansion through traditional diplomatic and economic pressure. This approach will fail. Human technological advancement shows no signs of slowing, and their industrial capacity appears to be growing exponentially. He activated new sections of his holographic display, showing economic and industrial data that his intelligence services had gathered. In the past 50 standard years, human industrial output has increased by a factor of 20. Not 20%, 20 times. They're not just building ships. They're building the infrastructure to build ships faster than anyone thought possible. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. Even the most aggressive expansion phases in galactic history had seen growth rates measured in single-digit percentages, not multiples. Second, Zektar continued, we can attempt to form military alliances against them. This approach will also fail, and catastrophically so. What I witnessed was not a military demonstration, it was a police action. Humans consider pirate elimination to be routine law enforcement. Imagine what their response would be to an actual military threat. The hologram showed tactical analyses of human weapons capabilities, energy outputs that dwarfed anything in current arsenals, projectile velocities approaching significant fractions of light speed, and, most troubling of all, weapons that seemed to manipulate fundamental forces in ways that current scientific understanding couldn't explain. The third option, Zektar said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, is to accept that the balance of power in this galaxy has fundamentally shifted. Humanity is not a rising power that might someday challenge the established order. They are already the dominant military force in known space, and they achieved this position while most of us weren't even paying attention. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in the Chamber's history, representatives from species that had warred against each other for millennia found themselves united in a single emotion: fear. Senator Thrixal was the first to break the silence. Even accepting your analysis, Ambassador, what do you propose we do? Surrender our sovereignty to a species we barely understand. I propose, Zektar replied, that we try to understand them before we make any irreversible decisions. And that understanding begins with recognizing that everything we think we know about power, warfare, and interstellar relations may no longer apply. Over the following hours, the debate raged through the chamber. Military experts presented analysis after analysis, each one reaching the same uncomfortable conclusion. If Zektar's observations were accurate, no current galactic power could stand against focused human military action. The mathematics were stark and unforgiving. But it was Counselor Ythera of the Collective who asked the question that would haunt every delegate present. Ambassador Zektar, in your observation of these humans, did you perceive any territorial ambitions? Any desire for conquest or expansion at others' expense? Zektar paused, remembering his conversation with Captain Chun aboard the Indomitable Spirit. Counselor, that may be the most disturbing aspect of the entire encounter. I saw no evidence of territorial ambition whatsoever. Their focus seems entirely centered on what they call justice, protecting those who cannot protect themselves. That's actually encouraging, isn't it? If they have no territorial ambitions, you don't understand, Zektar interrupted, his voice carrying a note of something approaching despair. A conqueror wants your territory, your resources, your population. These things can be negotiated, traded, shared. But a species that appoints itself the guardian of justice in the galaxy? What do you negotiate with that? How do you bargain with beings who believe they're fighting for the moral order of the universe itself? The implications settled over the chamber like a suffocating blanket. Every delegate present represented civilizations built on compromise, on the understanding that might makes right, on the acceptance that some suffering was simply the price of order. These humans seemed to reject that entire framework. What you're suggesting, said Counselor Vexani slowly, is that humanity represents not just a shift in military power, but a fundamental challenge to our entire social and political order. Exactly, Zektar confirmed. They don't want to rule the galaxy. They want to reform it. And they have the power to do so whether we consent or not. As the session moved toward its conclusion, emergency votes were called on 3 separate motions. The first, to establish immediate diplomatic contact with human leadership, passed unanimously. The second, to begin sharing intelligence about human capabilities among all member species, also passed without dissent. The third motion, proposed by the hegemony, called for the formation of a joint military task force to monitor human activities and respond to potential threats. This motion failed by a narrow margin, but only after heated debate and several near challenges to personal combat. As delegates began filing out of the chamber, each lost in their own thoughts about this new reality, Zektar found himself approached by Ambassador Quillith of the Border Systems Alliance. The diminutive being's scaled features were marked with the stress patterns his species displayed when deeply troubled. Ambassador Zektar, Quillith said quietly, "May I speak with you privately? There's something my government needs to know, but I didn't want to raise it in open session." They moved to a smaller consultation chamber, its privacy shields ensuring their conversation would remain confidential. Quillith activated his own holographic projector, displaying star charts that showed the border system's territories, dozens of smaller worlds that formed a buffer zone between the major galactic powers. 3 weeks ago, Quillith said, without preamble, before your report was filed, we received a communication from human authorities. They were inquiring about certain activities in our space. Zektar felt his blood chill. What kind of activities? Slave trading, Quillith admitted, his voice barely audible. Some of our member worlds still practice various forms of bonded labor. It's not technically illegal under current galactic law, and the border systems have always maintained that internal affairs. What did you tell them? Zektar interrupted. We explained our sovereign rights, cited relevant treaties, noted that these practices are confined to our own citizens and don't affect interstellar commerce. Quillith's voice was shaking now. Ambassador Zektar, do you know what they said in response? Zektar didn't trust himself to speak. He simply shook his head. They said, "Thank you for clarifying your position. We'll be in touch." Quillith deactivated the hologram with trembling fingers. Ambassador, what do you think they meant by that? Zektar thought about Captain Chin's calm demeanor as she watched pirates being systematically hunted through their own station. He remembered her words about drawing lines and saying no further. Most of all, he recalled her absolute certainty that evil would not be tolerated, regardless of legal technicalities or political considerations. Ambassador Quillith, he said quietly, I think you should prepare your people for visitors. And I think you should very seriously consider changing your laws before they arrive. As Quillith hurried away to contact his government, Zektar remained in the consultation chamber, staring at the spot where the holographic star charts had been. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless worlds where beings suffered under systems that more powerful species had deemed necessary or acceptable. For the first time in his long career, Zektar wondered what the galaxy would look like when humanity finished reforming it. More troubling still, he wondered if any of them would recognize it when they were done. The human delegation arrived at Nexus Prime exactly one standard month after the emergency Galactic Council session. Their ship, a sleek vessel that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, docked with the diplomatic station without fanfare or announcement. Most species would have sent advance notice, requested formal ceremonies, or at least filed proper customs declarations. The humans simply arrived. Ambassador Zektar watched from the observation deck as the human party disembarked. He had expected military officers or seasoned diplomats, beings who radiated the kind of authority he had witnessed aboard the indomitable Spirit. Instead, he saw what appeared to be civilians, men and women in simple, dark clothing who moved with quiet confidence, but without the aggressive bearing he had anticipated. The delegation was led by a woman whose silver hair and lined face suggested advanced age, though she carried herself with the vitality of someone much younger. Her name, according to the diplomatic credentials transmitted just moments before docking, was Dr. Elena Vasquez, Director of Human Interspecies Relations. Not exactly what you expected, is it? Zektar turned to find Counselor Vexani behind him, her crystalline form refracting the station's lights into complex patterns on the walls. I confess to some confusion, Honored Counselor, Zektar replied. Given what we witnessed of their military capabilities, I expected their diplomatic corps to reflect that intensity. Vexani's harmonic laugh carried notes of uncertainty. Perhaps that's the point, Ambassador. Perhaps they're trying to reassure us that they come in peace. Or, Zektar thought privately, perhaps they're so confident in their strength that they don't feel the need to display it. The second possibility was far more disturbing than the first. The formal meeting was scheduled to take place in the Council's primary negotiation chamber, a vast room designed to accommodate the physical and psychological needs of dozens of species simultaneously. Environmental controls maintained separate atmospheric zones, lighting adjusted to each delegation's sensory requirements, and the furniture could be reconfigured to support beings ranging from gaseous entities to creatures weighing several tons. When the human delegation entered, they chose simple chairs arranged in a semicircle, declining the more elaborate seating options available. Dr. Vasquez took the central position, flanked by two other humans whose roles were not immediately clear. Unlike the elaborate regalia worn by most galactic diplomats, they were dressed in what appeared to be standard civilian clothing. Honored delegates, Dr. Vasquez began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. We appreciate your invitation to address this assembly. We understand there are concerns about recent human activities, and we're here to provide clarity and context. Senator Thrixal was the first to speak, his insectoid form clicking with barely restrained agitation. Dr. Vasquez, our concerns stem from reports of overwhelming military force used against what amounts to a minor criminal organization. The thoroughness of your response has raised questions about human intentions toward other galactic powers. Dr. Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. Senator, I understand your concerns, but I think there may be some fundamental misunderstandings about human psychology and motivation that we should address first. She activated a holographic projector, but instead of displaying military might or territorial maps, the image that appeared showed a simple scene. A human family gathered around what appeared to be a meal, their faces lit with genuine affection and contentment. This, Dr. Vasquez said quietly, is why humans fight. Not for territory, not for resources, not for dominance. We fight because somewhere in the galaxy, families like this one are being destroyed by beings who see suffering as profitable. The image changed to show humanitarian operations. Human medical teams treating alien refugees, human engineers rebuilding infrastructure on worlds devastated by conflict, human educators teaching literacy programs to species that have been denied knowledge by their oppressors. You see military action, Dr. Vasquez continued, but you're missing the larger picture. For every human soldier you observed, there are 100 human teachers, doctors, engineers, and aid workers spread across the galaxy. Our military exists to protect them, and to protect those they serve. Counselor Mordak leaned forward, her multiple arms weaving complex patterns of skepticism. Dr. Vasquez, this is all very touching, but it doesn't address the core issue. Your species possesses military capabilities that far exceed anything else in known space. How can you expect us to believe there are no territorial ambitions behind such power? For the first time, Dr. Vasquez smiled. Not the cold expression Zektar had seen on Captain Chun, but something warmer, tinged with what humans might call sadness. Counselor, may I ask how your own species achieved spaceflight? The question seemed to catch Mordak off guard. What relevance does that have to please humor me? Dr. Vasquez pressed gently. We developed space travel over the course of 15 centuries, Mordak replied stiffly. It was a gradual process, building from orbital platforms to system exploration to eventual faster-than-light capabilities. And during those 15 centuries, how many wars did your people fight? Mordak's arms stilled. I don't see how that's relevant. Hundreds, Dr. Vasquez answered for her. I've read your histories, Counselor. Your people fought hundreds of wars during their technological development. Resource wars, territorial wars, ideological wars. It's the pattern followed by virtually every species in this chamber. The holographic display changed again, showing historical footage from dozens of different worlds. Cities burning under alien skies, refugee columns stretching beyond horizons, the aftermath of conflicts that had shaped civilizations across the galaxy. Every species here achieved technological advancement through conflict, Dr. Vasquez observed. You learned to build better weapons because you needed them to defeat your enemies. You developed space travel because you needed to escape dying worlds or reach new resources to fund your wars. Conflict drove innovation, and innovation enabled greater conflict. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Humans are different. We developed our most advanced technologies not to win wars, but to prevent them. The display shifted to show human technological development, but the progression was unlike anything the assembled delegates had seen before. Instead of centuries of gradual advancement punctuated by military innovations, human progress showed explosive leaps in capability occurring within mere decades. When humans achieved nuclear weapons, Dr. Vasquez explained, we didn't use them to conquer our neighbors. We used them to realize that warfare had become too dangerous to continue. When we developed space travel, it wasn't to escape a dying world or find new territories to exploit. It was because we looked at the stars and wondered what was out there. Ambassador Zektar found his voice for the first time since the session began. Dr. Vasquez, you're describing a species that developed advanced military capabilities without being driven by military necessity. That's unprecedented. Exactly, Dr. Vasquez agreed. And it explains why our approach to galactic affairs seems so alien to you. We didn't build our military to fight wars. We build it to ensure wars don't happen. We didn't develop these technologies to threaten others. We developed them to protect those who can't protect themselves. Counselor Ythera spoke up, her voice carrying the electronic modulation of her species' translation matrix. Dr. Vasquez, even accepting your characterization of human motivations, surely you must understand our concerns. The power you've demonstrated is sufficient to threaten any civilization in the galaxy. Yes, Dr. Vasquez said simply. It is. The blunt admission sent a chill through the chamber. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, while others activated privacy shields to conduct rapid consultations with their advisors. But consider this, Dr. Vasquez continued before anyone could respond. We've possessed these capabilities for several decades now. In that time, how many sovereign worlds have we invaded? How many independent governments have we toppled? How many territories have we claimed through force? The silence that followed was answer enough. The pirate organization we eliminated last month was the first time in 50 years that humans have used military force against any organized group, Dr. Vasquez said. And even then, we only acted after diplomatic channels failed completely and only after the criminals in question had ignored multiple warnings to cease their activities. She stood, moving to the center of the chamber, where her words would carry to every delegation present. Honored delegates, I want to share something with you that might help explain human psychology. In our history, we have a concept called noblesse oblige, the idea that those with power have a moral obligation to use that power responsibly, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The holographic display changed one final time, showing images from across the galaxy. Human aid workers in disaster zones, human peacekeepers preventing conflicts between lesser powers, human researchers sharing advanced medical technologies freely with any species that requested them. We don't see our capabilities as a source of authority over others, Dr. Vasquez continued. We see them as a responsibility to others. Every weapon we build, every ship we launch, every technology we develop, all of it exists to ensure that the innocent can live in peace. Senator Thrixal's clicking grew more agitated. Dr. Vasquez, you paint a noble picture, but actions speak louder than words. The systematic way your forces eliminated that pirate organization suggests capabilities and planning that go far beyond simple law enforcement. Dr. Vasquez nodded gravely. You're absolutely right, Senator. And I think it's time you understood the full scope of what we're dealing with. She activated her personal communicator, speaking briefly in what the translators identified as Mandarin Chinese. Within moments, new displays activated around the chamber, not holographic projections, but direct feeds from various locations across the galaxy. What you're seeing, Dr. Vasquez said as images filled the air around them, are live feeds from 43 different systems where human forces are currently conducting operations. The assembled delegates watched in growing alarm as the feeds showed human ships and personnel in dozens of star systems. Some were clearly engaged in humanitarian missions, disaster relief, medical aid, infrastructure development. But others showed military operations, human forces moving against what appeared to be slavery operations, smuggling rings, and various other criminal enterprises. The pirate station you observed last month wasn't an isolated incident, Dr. Vasquez explained quietly. It was part of a coordinated galactic operation to eliminate organized crime wherever we find it. In the past 6 months, human forces have dismantled over 200 criminal organizations, freed approximately 50,000 enslaved beings, and seized enough illegal weapons to arm a small fleet. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates leaped to their feet, shouting questions and demands in their native languages. Some accused the humans of conducting unauthorized military operations in sovereign space. Others demanded to know why their governments hadn't been informed, and still others called for immediate defensive measures. Through it all, Dr. Vasquez remained calm, waiting for the uproar to die down before continuing. We didn't inform your governments because, frankly, we weren't sure who we could trust, she said when order was finally restored. Our intelligence indicated that several major galactic powers were either directly involved in these criminal enterprises or were receiving substantial profits from them. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. No one asked for specifics, but several delegates avoided making eye contact with their colleagues. Dr. Vasquez, Counselor Vexany, said carefully, "What you're describing sounds suspiciously like an attempt to impose human law and morality on the galaxy as a whole. Surely you can understand why this would concern other sovereign powers." Dr. Vasquez's expression hardened slightly, and for a moment, Zektar caught a glimpse of the same cold fury he had witnessed in Captain Shun. Counselor, we're not imposing human law. We're enforcing standards that every civilization in this chamber claims to support. The prohibition of slavery, the protection of innocence, the right of beings to live free from predation by those more powerful than themselves. She gestured toward the ongoing feeds, many of which now showed rescued slaves being treated by human medical teams. Every species represented in this chamber has signed treaties prohibiting these practices. Every government here has passed laws making these activities illegal. The only thing humans have done differently is actually enforce those laws. The uncomfortable truth of her statement settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. For centuries, the galactic community had passed resolutions and signed treaties condemning various forms of organized crime and exploitation. But enforcement had always been left to individual governments, most of whom found it easier to look the other way when the crimes occurred outside their immediate territories. What you're witnessing, Dr. Vasquez concluded, is not human aggression or territorial expansion. What you're witnessing is the end of the galaxy's tolerance for institutionalized evil. We've decided that someone else's problem is no longer an acceptable excuse for allowing suffering to continue. As the session drew toward its close, delegate after delegate requested private consultations with the human representatives. Some sought assurances that their own territories would be respected, others wanted to negotiate cooperation agreements, and more than a few quietly inquired about the possibility of requesting human assistance with their own criminal problems. But it was Ambassador Quillith who asked the question that everyone was thinking. Dr. Vasquez, how far are you prepared to take this campaign of yours? Dr. Vasquez's answer will be transmitted to every government in the galaxy within hours. As far as necessary, Ambassador. As far as necessary. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, each lost in their own thoughts about this new reality, Zektar found himself wondering if they had just witnessed the beginning of a new age in galactic history. An age where having the power to do something good made it a moral obligation to do so. And an age where humanity had both the power and the will to hold the entire galaxy to that standard 0.6 months after the diplomatic meeting at Nexus Prime, Ambassador Zektar found himself aboard another human vessel, though this time under very different circumstances. The ship Harmony's Edge was not a warship, but a mobile humanitarian command center, its corridors filled with medical equipment, refugee processing stations, and what humans called crisis response teams. The Kethari crisis had erupted without warning when the planet's primary government collapsed under the weight of an economic disaster orchestrated by off-world corporations. Within days, what had been a thriving industrial world of 2 billion souls had descended into chaos as various factions fought for control of the planet's valuable mineral resources. The Galactic Council had been debating intervention for 3 weeks when the human fleet arrived. Ambassador Zektar, Dr. Elena Vasquez greeted him as he stepped off the shuttle. Unlike their previous meeting in the sterile environment of the diplomatic station, here she wore practical field clothes and carried herself with the brisk efficiency of someone managing a complex emergency. Thank you for accepting our invitation. I think it's important that the galactic community understands what we're actually doing here. Zektar looked around the bustling corridors, noting the organized chaos of a major relief operation. Humans moved with purpose between stations, coordinating with various alien specialists and aid workers. The atmosphere was one of controlled urgency, but what struck him most was the complete absence of military bearing among the personnel he could see. Dr. Vasquez, I must admit confusion. Our intelligence indicates that human military forces are currently engaged in operations on Kethari Prime, yet this facility appears to be entirely civilian in nature. Vasquez smiled, the expression carrying a warmth that hadn't been present during the formal diplomatic sessions. Ambassador, that's exactly the distinction I hoped you would observe. Come, let me show you something. She led him to an observation deck that provided a clear view of Kethari Prime below. The planet's surface was scarred by the recent conflicts. Fires burned in several major cities. Refugee columns were visible moving between population centers, and the orbital traffic patterns showed the complete breakdown of normal commercial activity. What you're seeing, Vasquez explained, is the result of what humans call disaster capitalism. Off-world corporations deliberately destabilized the planetary government through economic manipulation, then moved in to seize control of key resources while the population was too distracted by survival to resist. She activated a holographic display showing the corporate entities involved. Zektar recognized several names, major galactic conglomerates with connections to various council member species. The Galactic Council has been debating intervention because the situation involves multiple sovereign territories and complex economic relationships, Vasquez continued. Meanwhile, 2 billion beings are suffering because powerful interests see profit in their pain. So, humans decided to intervene unilaterally? Zektar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Not exactly, Vasquez replied. Let me show you what we actually did. The holographic display shifted to show human operations across the planet's surface. But instead of military assaults or occupying forces, Zektar saw something unprecedented. Massive relief operations conducted under the protection of human military units, but with the actual work being performed by civilian organizations. Every major population center on the planet is now receiving food, medical supplies, and temporary shelter, Vasquez explained. Our medical teams are treating anyone who needs help, regardless of their factional affiliations. Our engineers are restoring power grids and water purification systems. Our educators are maintaining school operations so children don't lose months or years of learning. Zektar watched the feeds with growing amazement. The scope of the operation was staggering. It would have required months of planning and the coordination of thousands of specialists across dozens of fields. How long have you been preparing for this intervention? He asked. We weren't, Vasquez said simply. This entire operation was assembled and deployed within 72 hours of the government's collapse. The statement hit Zektar like a physical blow. No species he knew of could mount an operation of this scale with such speed. The logistics alone should have been impossible. I don't understand, he said. The planning required, the resource allocation, the coordination. Ambassador, you're thinking like a government, Vasquez interrupted gently. Humans don't plan for specific crises. We plan for the capacity to respond to any crisis. Every human world maintains disaster response capabilities that can be deployed anywhere in the galaxy within days. Every human citizen receives training in emergency aid and crisis management. When something like Cathari happens, we don't have to plan a response. We just activate systems that are already in place. She gestured toward the observation windows, where shuttle after shuttle could be seen departing for the planet's surface. What you're witnessing isn't military conquest or humanitarian intervention in the traditional sense, she continued. This is how human society functions. When people are suffering, we respond. It doesn't matter if they're human or alien, if their government invited us or not, if helping them serves our strategic interests. Suffering demands response, and we respond. Over the following hours, Vasquez took Zektar on a tour of the operation that would fundamentally alter his understanding of human civilization. They visited medical stations where human doctors worked alongside alien specialists to treat refugees from dozens of different species. They observed engineering teams that were not just restoring infrastructure, but actually improving it, installing more efficient systems, and adding redundancies that would prevent future failures. Most remarkable of all, they visited what humans called conflict resolution centers, facilities where the various Cathari factions were being brought together to negotiate a peaceful end to the crisis. The fighting stopped almost immediately after our arrival, Vasquez explained as they watched human mediators facilitating discussions between groups that had been trying to kill each other just days before. Not because we threatened anyone, but because we removed the conditions that were driving the conflict. I don't understand, Zektar said. How does providing humanitarian aid stop a civil war? Because most conflicts aren't really about ideology or ethnic hatred, Vasquez replied. They're about resources. When people are starving, when their children are sick, when they don't have clean water or safe shelter, they become desperate enough to fight for what they need. Remove the desperation, and the fighting often stops on its own. The mediation sessions, Zektar observed, were unlike anything in his diplomatic experience. Instead of the formal protocols and elaborate ceremonies that characterized most interspecies negotiations, these sessions focused on practical problem-solving. Human facilitators helped the various factions identify their actual needs rather than their stated demands. Then, worked to find solutions that addressed everyone's core concerns. The mining rights that everyone was fighting over, Vasquez pointed out, represent less than 2% of the planet's actual mineral wealth. The corporations that started this crisis convinced the various factions that controlling those specific mines was essential for their survival, when in reality, there are dozens of other sites that could provide the same resources. By the end of his first day aboard the Harmony's Edge, Zektar had observed something that challenged his fundamental understanding of power and politics. The humans weren't imposing their will on the Cathari people. They were creating conditions that allowed the Cathari to solve their own problems. Dr. Vasquez, he said as they shared what humans called dinner in the ship's common area, I need to ask a question that may seem offensive. Please, speak freely, she replied. What do humans gain from all this? The resources you're expending, the personnel you're deploying, the risks you're taking. What's your return on investment? Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, seeming to consider how to frame her response. Ambassador, let me ask you something in return. Do you have children? Zektar's mandibles clicked with surprise. Ah yes, 2 offspring, both adults now with their own families. When they were young and they hurt themselves, fell down, got sick, had nightmares. Did you help them because you expected some kind of return on your investment? Of course not. They were my children. Their welfare was inherently valuable to me. Now expand that feeling to encompass every sentient being in the galaxy, Vasquez said quietly. That's how humans see this. We help because helping is what you do when you have the power to help. The suffering of strangers is as real and as important as the suffering of our own families. Zektar struggled to process this concept. In Vorthak society, loyalty and protection extended outward in concentric circles: self, family, clan, species. The idea of feeling genuine responsibility for the welfare of complete strangers, especially strangers of different species, was almost incomprehensible. But surely there must be limits, he pressed. Humans can't respond to every crisis in the galaxy. You must have to choose which situations warrant intervention. Vasquez's expression grew troubled. That's the question that keeps me awake at night, Ambassador. Because you're right. We can't be everywhere at once. Every day, my office receives reports of suffering that we're not equipped to address immediately. People die while we're deciding how to prioritize our resources. She stared out at the planet below, where the lights of human aid stations were beginning to create points of stability in the chaos. The goal isn't to solve every problem instantly, she said eventually. The goal is to build systems that make intervention unnecessary. We're not just treating the symptoms of this crisis. We're addressing the underlying conditions that made it possible. The next morning, Zektar observed something that would remain burned in his memory for the rest of his life. Human forces had located one of the off-world corporate facilities responsible for starting the crisis, a heavily fortified compound where the company executives had been coordinating the exploitation of Cathari's resources. Unlike the methodical police action he had witnessed against the pirates, this operation was conducted with surgical precision and absolutely no violence. Human specialists simply appeared within the compound, bypassing every security system as if it didn't exist, and politely informed the executives that their operations were being terminated. The corporate representatives demanded to see legal authorization, threatened diplomatic consequences, and insisted that their actions were perfectly legal under existing galactic commercial law. The human response was delivered by a young officer whose calm demeanor masked what Zektar was beginning to recognize as characteristic human determination. Your legal status is irrelevant, the officer explained patiently. Your actions have caused massive suffering among civilian populations. That suffering will now cease, regardless of what paperwork you think authorizes it. Within 6 hours, every off-world corporate asset on the planet had been seized or neutralized. The executives found themselves aboard human transport vessels, bound for facilities where they would face what humans called restorative justice, a process focused not on punishment, but on ensuring they understood the consequences of their actions and made restitution to their victims. Dr. Vasquez, Zektar, said as they watched the corporate transports depart, "What you've just done will have enormous repercussions. Those companies have connections to major galactic powers. There will be diplomatic protests, economic retaliation, possibly even military responses." "Yes," she agreed calmly. "There will be. And that doesn't concern you?" Vasquez turned to face him, and for a moment, Zektar saw past the warm diplomat to the steel underneath. "Ambassador, let me explain something about human psychology that I don't think your people fully understand yet. We have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. For most of our history, humans were forced to accept that we lacked the power to prevent distant suffering. We could feel compassion, but we couldn't act on it." She gestured toward the planet below, where the crisis was already beginning to stabilize as human aid reached every population center. "That age is over. We now have the power to act on our compassion, and that makes inaction a choice rather than a necessity. When we choose not to help someone we could help, we become complicit in their suffering." The implications of her statement settled over Zektar like a weight. If humans truly believed that having the power to prevent suffering created an obligation to prevent it, then no amount of diplomatic pressure or economic retaliation would deter them from future interventions. "Dr. Vasquez," he said slowly, "what you're describing isn't just a foreign policy doctrine. It's a complete rejection of the entire galactic order." "Yes," she said simply. "It is." As Zektar prepared to return to his own ship and report these observations to the Vorthak High Command, he found himself grappling with questions that had no easy answers. How does a galaxy built on the acceptance of suffering respond to a species that refuses to accept it? What happens when beings with the power of gods are guided by the moral principles of saints? Looking back at the Harmony's edge as the shuttle departed, watching the human aid operation that was already transforming an entire world, Zektar realized he had witnessed something that would reshape galactic civilization. Whether that reshaping would be seen as liberation or conquest would depend entirely on which side of human justice you found yourself standing.